The Sons of Liberty was the group of men that protested against British Parliament. Samuel Adams was the leader of this group, and he led his men in a protest well known as the Boston Tea Party. Some other famous figures in the Sons of Liberty include Paul Revere, Benedict Arnold, John Hancock, Patrick Henry, and James Otis. The Sons of Liberty protested against the Tea Act, which was the act of British Parliament that placed a tax on the tea that the Americans loved to drink. They believed the solution was to protest to hopefully change the course Parliament was taking on the ruling of the colonies. The Americans felt that they should have had a say-so in the things that happened in their land, mainly regarding taxes.
The Tea Act caused the Boston Tea Party. The Bostonians, who were colonists in Boston, began a protest of the tax of tea. They were being taxed without representation in the government. They did not think this was fair. The colonists felt that they should not be taxed by the British. British Parliament taxed the Bostonians for unfair reasons. The Bostonians were against the British Parliament.
The protesters disguised themselves as Native Americans and went to the Boston Harbor. They ran to the British ships and dumped out hundreds of crates of tea into the Boston Harbor in anger of the Tea Act. The Boston Tea Party occurred on December 16, 1773. These are two informational videos to further understanding of the Boston Tea Party.
He even has the nerve to tax our cup of tea. To put it kindly, King, we really don't agree. Gonna show you how we feel. We're gonna dump this tea and turn this harbor into the biggest cup of tea in history.
50 men, some apparently dressed as Native Americans, marched down to Griffin's Wharf, stormed aboard 3 ships, and threw 340 tea chests overboard. An infuriated British government responded with the so-called Coercive Acts of 1774, which, among other things, closed the port of Boston until the locals compensated the East India Company for the tea. That never happened.
The Boston Tea Party was effective, but it also had some downfalls for the colonists. This protest was effective because it unified the colonists, but their celebration was shortly cut off. Parliament came together because they were angry that the colonists were rebelling against them. They decided to pass another law for punishment of this revolt, and they were called the Intolerable Acts. The Intolerable Acts were also known as the Coercive Acts. This act closed all ports in Boston, and they were to remain closed until all the tea that was dumped into the harbor had been paid for. Also, this resulted in the passing of other rulings by Parliament, which included the Administration of Justice Act, which meant that any British officials that had to be sent to a trial for crime were to be sent back to England for a fair trial. Another act that was enforced was the Quebec Act, but the final law was the Quartering Act, which made the colonists house the soldiers that were stationed in America. The result of the Boston Tea Party did make hard times for colonists, but in the end, they all stuck together and ended up defeating England. As a group, we all support this protest. The Boston Tea Party brought all of the colonists together as one to boycott against Great Britain. This protest in the end was effective because it did give the colonists freedom. We agree with this protest because the colonists became what we know as our country today, the United States of America.